Hi, I'm Caitlin, and this is Book Chats. Today I have something really exciting. Rebecca from Why Mermaids and I were chatting on Twitter during the Oscars, and we thought it would be really cool to create a tag centered around the 2015 Best Picture nominees. We have a question for each Best Picture nominee, and then kind of a bonus question at the end. And so I just thought I would go through and give you my answers, and then I'll tag some people. And also I wanted to say that if you want to watch Rebecca's video too, because we jointly came up with this tag, and that really means that she came up with all the good questions, I just added a couple. She also is posting a video on this tag today, and so I will put a link in the doobly-doo. And so definitely check out her video. The first movie that I'm going to talk about is American Sniper. So American Sniper is based on the memoir of Chris Kyle, who is thought to be the sniper with the most recorded kills. The question for this movie then is, what is your favorite memoir? So my favorite memoir, this is definitely the easiest question of all of these for me to answer. I do read a lot of memoirs, but the one that sticks out the most is All Creatures Great and Small by James Herriot. This is a book that was first read to me when I was a kid by my father because I love animals, and it is about the life of an English country veterinarian in the 1930s. I read this book a ton, and for a long time I really thought I wanted to be a veterinarian, and that I largely attribute that to these books. I never fail to laugh and cry when I read All Creatures Great and Small. The second movie we're going to talk about is Birdman. Birdman was a Best Picture nominee and actually was also the Best Picture winner for this year, and it is a film about a washed-up old actor who was really famous for a superhero character that he played in his younger days, and is now trying to kind of prove himself as a serious actor on Broadway in a play that he wrote himself. And so the interesting thing about Birdman is that basically the main character, you're not really sure if he is mentally all there, and he kind of is unreliable. And so we wanted to choose a book with an unreliable narrator to go along with Birdman. And the book that immediately came to mind for me is Chime by Franny Billingsley. I hope it's not a spoiler to tell you guys that this has an unreliable narrator, but basically what makes the book really interesting is that the narrator has these very specific things that she believes about events that happened in the past and about who she is as a person, and as you're reading it becomes clear that not everything she believes is actually true, but as the reader you're left to kind of sort out what you think is true and what's not. And then what I really appreciate is that in the end you actually do find out some of the truth. The third Best Picture nominee I'm going to talk about is Boyhood. Boyhood is Richard Linklater's 12 years in the making masterpiece. Basically, this movie was shot over 12 years, and it shows all of the actors aging naturally over that time. It's about the growing up process of him and what he goes through and what his sister goes through and what his mother goes through during that time. And so the question we've chosen to go with Boyhood is, what book most represents your childhood? This question was difficult for me to answer because the two books that immediately came to mind are books that I've talked about recently and should stop talking about. What I am going to talk about is this very bizarre, somewhat obscure picture book called The Mysteries of Harris Burdick. Basically, this is a picture book that has a frame story, but essentially what it is I think 12 pictures, and each one of them has a corresponding title and a single sentence. And so basically the premise is that you, as the reader of this book, have to fill in and make up the story that goes along with the title and the sentence in the picture. My parents were just always about using your imagination. The Mysteries of Harris Burdick, where you are required to use your imagination to make up the stories on your own, is really representative of my childhood. So the fourth movie that I'm going to be talking about is The Grand Budapest Hotel, which is a Wes Anderson film. If you know anything about Wes Anderson, or have you seen any of his other films, he just has very quirky characters and a quirky, distinct style. I keep saying quirky because the question is, who is your favorite quirky character? So this one is definitely Cammy from the Lindburn Legacies, the first book of which is Unspoken by Sarah Rees Brennan. She is such a quirky character. Everything from the fact that she specifically purchases her wardrobe from secondhand stores and online so she doesn't look like anyone else, to the fact that she also really wants to be a reporter, and she's just so spunky, and she has she's just so I'm gonna take charge, that she writes her own school newspaper and produces it even though no one's asked her to. She's just such a quirky character, and her voice is so strong, and she is the main protagonist. She narrates most of the book and her voice just comes through so strongly. The fifth movie that I'm going to talk about that was nominated for the Best Picture Academy Award is The Imitation Game. The Imitation Game, if you don't know, is a kind of a biopic about Alan Turing, who is famous for a couple of reasons. The kind of part of that the movie covers of his life has largely to do with the fact that he was part of a team that built the computer that broke the Enigma, which was a secret code the Germans were using in World War II. He also is famous for an eponymous test, the Turing test, that is basically about testing artificial intelligence. Alan Turing was gay, and he lived during a time that homosexual acts were actually illegal in England, and so he was actually prosecuted for acting on his sexuality. This is the aspect that kind of influenced our questions. So you can choose to answer either both or one of these two questions for the Imitation Game. Please choose a book with LGBTQ characters or themes, or choose a book whose main character is a criminal by societal standards. I actually chose to go with the latter, although this author sometimes has LGBTQ representation in her characters, but I don't think that this series specifically does. So I chose the Curse Workers trilogy by Holly Black. The first book is White Cat, the second book is Red Glove, and the third book is Black Heart. Basically, the premise of the books is that there's this group of people who are born with this ability, this magical ability that when they touch your skin, with their hands, they can influence you in one of a variety of ways. The premise of the book that makes it fit in here is that the government in the United States has made curse working illegal, which has driven it underground. So all curse workers either are never allowed to use their curse working, or they work for the mafia, or they work for organized crime, because they are automatically criminals as soon as they use their curse working ability. Just by being who they are and who they were born as are considered illegal if they act on that. The sixth movie is Selma, which is kind of a historical and a little bit of a biopic about Martin Luther King Jr. And for this, we'd like you to choose a book written by an African-American author and or featuring African-American characters. So when I started thinking about books for this one, I realized just how few African-American authors I have read. So I went back to middle school and I picked Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry, which is a Newbery Honor-winning book and is about a family that's living in the South and kind of the dual standard that was caused or is present because of a lot of systemic racism and also overt racism. The seventh and second to last movie that was nominated for Best Picture, The Theory of Everything, which is a biopic about Stephen Hawking based on a memoir written by his first wife. About kind of his diagnosis with ALS, his becoming a really famous physicist, and also about his relationship with his first wife. So this movie kind of chronicles an unconventional love story, and so we would like you to choose a book with an unconventional love story. The book that I chose is If I Lie by Corinne Jackson. It's really difficult to describe how it fits this category without offering any spoilers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the jacket copy for the book that the publisher provides. If I Lie by Corinne Jackson is a powerful debut novel about the gray space between truth and perception. Quinn's done the unthinkable. She kissed a guy who is not Carrie, her boyfriend, and she got caught. Being branded a cheater would be bad enough, but Quinn is deemed a traitor and shunned by all of her friends. Because Carrie's not just any guy, he's serving in Afghanistan and revered by everyone in their small military town. Quinn could clear her name, but that would mean revealing secrets that she's vowed to keep, secrets that aren't hers to share. And when Carrie goes MIA, Quinn must decide how far she'll go to protect her boyfriend and her promise. There are kind of three unconventional love stories, I think, in this book. They're not all romantic. One of them is definitely a romantic love story, and the other two are other kinds of love that I think are very important also. And the final film that was nominated for Best Picture is Whiplash, which is a film about a guy who wants to be a jazz drummer and kind of what he goes through to get there, and he basically has to practice really hard, and he gets this teacher who is kind of abusive in the ways that he pushes him and what he demands from him, and he just has to focus and really persist in his drumming in order to achieve his dream. Persistence is really what we wanted to focus on with this book, and we would like you to choose a book that took you multiple times to get through but that you ended up loving. I was able to think of a book that even while I was reading it, I liked it, and I really could tell that it was already changing my life, but it was so hard to read. It took me so long to read, and literally the only reason I finished this book is because I was on a 4-hour flight, and I told myself it was the only book I was allowed to read on that flight, so I powered through and finished, and it's because it has this very unique writing style and that is difficult to read. Like, it just is a slow read, and I feel like you have to absorb things very slowly, and so you can't just power through. It is a Christian nonfiction book, and it's called 1,000 Gifts by Anne Voskamp. I have the fancy fake leather edition. I also have it on my Kindle. The premise of this is the author has been challenged to write a list of 1,000 things that she is thankful for, and so she talks about, like, throughout her year, how she is writing those and how this challenge really brings her closer to God. And I really felt like that this book was life-changing to me. So I've actually read this book at least twice in full, and I have read select chapters other times as well. It never gets easier. Every time I read it, it is a struggle. The last question that we're going to answer is a bonus question. It's, what book would you like to see made into a movie? And this was so easy for me because there's a book that I am dying to see made into a movie, even though I know they're totally going to ruin it, and that is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. I think this book is way too complex to be made into a movie. It is way too nuanced to be made into a movie. But every time I read it, the Night Circus is described so vividly, and some of the parties that are held are described so vividly and so beautifully, and I just desperately want to see the Night Circus. And of course, I don't think there's ever actually going to be a Night Circus popping up around me, and so I have to see it on screen, and so I really, really want the Night Circus to be made into a film because I just desperately want to see how they recreate all of what happens in it on screen. I just have to see the Night Circus. What books would you choose for all of these questions? I am going to tag 4 people specifically because I would really love to see you guys answer these. I'd like to tag David from Lit Journal, Natasha from Toshopolis, Sam from Thoughts on Tomes, and Alyssa from Reading Reflections. I would super love to see you guys answer this, so I would love, love, love to see this tag go on. That's the 2015 Best Picture tag, and I super look forward to seeing all of your guys' answers on this tag.